So this section wants you to solve by factoring. So you factor first and then use the zero factor property, which is what I was saying. If you have two things multiplied together, it gives you zero. At least one of those have to be zero, or it can be more than two. Any product, however many you have, if it gives you zero, then at least one of those somewhere in the product has to be zero. So to solve by factoring this, you could actually also solve using radicals. If you add 4 to both sides and then take the square root of both sides and do plus or minus the square root of 4, which would be plus or minus 2. You can do it that way, but since it says to factor, use difference of squares. So x squared minus 4 is x minus 2, x plus 2, or vice versa. And then set each factor equal to 0. Oops, equals 0. So you get x equals 2 or x equals negative 2, which is what you would get if you add 4 to both sides and take the square root. You get the same answer. For this one, again, you could divide by 3 and take the square root of both sides and do plus or minus the square root on the right and get the answer, but since we're supposed to do factoring, I'm going to factor. So in order to factor, to solve by factoring, you want it to equal 0, so we need to subtract the 12 over and get the right hand side 0. So now we can factor. So you can either factor from here or you can factor out the 3 first. It's always easier to factor out the greatest common factor. So 12 divided by 3 is 4. And then this is a difference of squares. Again, so it's 3 times a minus 2, a plus 2. So we have this product is equal to 0, so set each factor equal to 0. Again, 3 can't be 0, so you can just kind of ignore it. So you would have a minus 2 is 0, or a plus 2 is 0. So a is 2 or negative 2. And then for the next one here, this one is a regular quadratic and you want to factor it. So whatever method you use to factor, if it's guess and check or multiplying a times c and listing the factors and do grouping, however you want to factor. So factors of negative 10, that'll give you a 3 or 5 and 2. So this factors into a plus 5 times a minus 2 is equal to 0. So then set each factor equal to 0. So you get a is either negative 5 or a is 2. And then of course you can check these all the time as well. You can plug in negative 5 and 2 into the equation and it will work. So for any of these problems you can always check your answer. And for this last one here, again, to solve by factoring, the right hand side has to be 0. So we want to add 1 to both sides. And then this factors into, you have a 4 here, so it's either going to be a 2x and a 2x or a 4x and an x. So this one actually factors into 2x minus 1 times 2x minus 1. So it's 2x minus 1 twice. So you usually set each factor equal to 0. If it happens twice, you don't have to write it down twice. You can just do it once. So add 1 to both sides. So x is a half, and it's a half twice because it was 2 factors, so it happens 2 times, it equals a half. So just remember, to solve by factoring, you always want the right hand side to be 0 and then factor. If it says to solve by factoring and it can't be factored, then you can just say it cannot be solved by factoring.